Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the maker be willing to rise for brief interrogation?
Again, I always remind everybody with respect to interrogation, questions have to be about items that the maker of the question doesn't know. Also, nobody is required to stand for interrogation. There's no entitlement to interrogation. I know that the good lady has indicated she will so stand, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I asked for a couple things yesterday on this bill. First of all, the PCCD bill, vote or report on how many times the perpetrator's gone and gotten a different weapon and used. Have we received anything back on that?
What we have been told from the Administrative Office of the Pennsylvania courts is that that information is not available. They are double checking.
There were a number of other questions that were a part of that. Do you have any procedures yet for dealing with anything that deals with the weapons once they've been confiscated if something happens to the perpetrator? For example, if the perpetrator happens to die, what happens to the estate on that 1 year? Do those weapons not go back to the estate?
As discussed in caucus yesterday, there's nothing in this bill that addresses this. However, Mr. Speaker, this is not new practice of weapon relinquishment. So I'm sure there's precedent out there as to what happens should the defendant have not identified in his or her will what they wanted to do with those weapons or firearms.
Earlier, when you first introduced this bill today, you'd said that this applies only to a victim of a crime, or those convicted of a crime. And then you repeated that only to a convicted of a crime. And then later you said it refers also to a final PFA. Now, are you saying that somebody has reached all the elements of having a conviction before they have their weapons seized from them?
We're talking about two different sides of the law here. Under the misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, that's where the criminal side and the conviction comes into place. The PFA is a judgment that's entered by the judge.
Okay, because you had said it initially, you had said it only convicted of a crime. Then you went on.
Like me to repeat my opening remarks, and I'll clarify that.
No, you've clarified it. That's what I wanted to get to. Let me see. You had said that there were 39 murders since we left in June that had where people had violated that PFA. At least that's what I understood.
That's not what I said.
How many?
What I said is there were 39. On Monday, it was reported as 37. Today, I learned it's 39 people who died as a result of domestic violence. I'd be happy to have my remarks read back to you.
That's fine. How many of those were by a firearm?
I will have to delineate that, and I'll get the answer back. Does it matter? They're dead.
As far as they're being dead, that does not matter at all. I'm not questioning that. It's just that...
Mr. Speaker, I believe what I said delineates the propensity for death when you have domestic violence, and guns and domestic violence, as I said in my opening comments, do not mix well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm finished with the interrogation. I appreciate the gentleladies.
On the bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
You may proceed.
Under our Constitution, we have items that are called rights. And historically, those rights have not been taken from one unless one has been convicted of a crime. And there's a distinct and marked difference between the elements of a conviction for a criminal act and the elements of a protection from abuse order. That being said, right now, the judges actually have the ability to have weapons confiscated as part of a final protection from abuse order. What this does is say, now, as a part of statute, you don't have to any longer be convicted of something in order to lose those rights. And I have a very hard time with that. I understand the reason the judges have that discretion is because those judges are standing right there with the individual and the couple and or whoever it is, and get a sense of what that, the potential for violence. The main flaw that we have under the current law is that we can't get that individual who has that propensity for violence the help that he needs or she needs before they go into that violent act. Having been in law enforcement, having dealt with domestic relation problems before, the first 4 or 5 hours is generally when that problem's going to happen. And on a military installation where my experience has been, where the individuals have to keep their weapons locked when they're on base in the base armory until they need them, then the guy will go back, or the woman will go back. I had a supervisor who actually had been beaten a male by his wife. So it's not a male or female issue, but they will go and grab a baseball bat, a hammer. They will use their fists. We are trying, Frédéric Bastiat used the comment that all government is force. We're either compelling somebody to do something or not to do something, but it's external. We've gone so far away from love your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, because we've gotten God out of the conversation, that we're not looking at trying to protect or to correct the soul problem that's going on in this state and in this nation. And what we are doing with this piece of legislation, and with one exception, virtually everybody that's been here has been talking about guns. When we know 3 times more people have been killed with knives and swords and edged weapons than have been killed with long guns. Those are the type of statistics that show that it's the evil intent in one's heart that dictates the actions. And until we find a way to step in and stop that, we are not going to correct the problem. And every single life matters. But by the same token, you look at what happened, and the reason our Constitution says what it does is not only back in those days to be able to help sustain life by the people going out and hunting, but more importantly, because of what was happening in places like Long Island when the British confiscated weapons so that the civilians could not rise up and defend their rights. Even the gentleman from Center County, he said about getting that 24 hours to cool off. From experience, I can tell you that's true. That is the biggest thing that will prevent the person from taking action. You'll get a bigger bang for the buck by finding a way to get that person the help that he needs or she needs to get the cooling off period, instead of as soon as they get that PFA, they go out with their drinking buddies, yeah, she's this or he's that, and getting themselves fired up, and then go and take action. Because that's generally the way things go. Or they'll get on social media and back and forth and get fired up and go and take action. One of the things that hasn't been addressed here is our fiscal note is in error. It says there will be zero cost. When you're looking at people, as one representative said about having hundreds of firearms, where are the state police going to find additional armory space? That is going to be a fiscal cost. So our fiscal note is in error. A lot of this bill, the main purpose of this bill is driven by fear. And people who are using this bill to address their fears are not addressing the root causes. They're seeking, in medical terms, they're treating the symptom and not the cause. This bill addresses a symptom rather than a cause, and evil will find a way to accomplish its intent. What we need to do as a society, through our churches, our community organizations, our being friends and neighbors to our neighbors, is to be there for them, to reach out and give help, and not encourage, like you see on social media, the encouragement of the bashing of the opposite party in order to make people get fired up and take some sort of reprehensible action. I appreciate the gentlelady's desire to stop the violence. I've seen it firsthand. I want to stop it, but until we start addressing the root of the problem, getting God and the love of God and the love of our neighbors back into our hearts. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. Until we start doing that, we are not going to start taking the corrective action that is truly going to save a significant number of lives. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.